to read yet another story. This one's called The Garment by P.L Travers. The bell rang in the outer court, a peremptory musical summons, and with much jangling of keys, St. Peter unlocked the double doors, opened them a little way, and put out his head through the crack. "Well," he demanded, "what do you want?" A man in a long white robe stepped forward. "I want to come in," he said. "What? Dressed up like an apprentice angel? Isn't that rather premature?" "My garment represents myself," said the man. "You can read it as though it were a book. There is no stain on it anywhere." "So I see. That makes the book difficult to read. Nothing to declare, as it were. I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. We only cater for sinners here." "But surely I've a right to be here. I've led a blameless life." "We do not deal in rights," said St. Peter. "Though there is grace abounding, perhaps it would be more to the point if you told me about the wrongs." There are none. Guilt has passed me by. I've never practiced avarice, keeping only enough for my simple needs, giving alms to the beggar at the corner, and tipping waiters generously. Moreover, I've envied no man, nor been a source of envy. I eat sparsely, once a day only, a meager dinner of herbs, and as for lechery, I deplore it. When I see a woman, even the passing swing of a skirt, I quickly turn my back at the scene or look in the other direction. Pride, too, I likewise abhor, bowing both to king and peasant, not setting myself above another, nor boasting of my possessions. And I fill my days profitably, never an idle moment. Compared with myself, the ant is a slugger. Sloth finds no place within me. Last of all, I've never lost my temper. Alas, poor ant, St. Peter grinned. I feel for you, my good sir. You've told me a tale that is all perfection. But perfection is a heavy burden. I have not known one who could carry it. But surely, the man was clearly dismayed, you must take account of virtue. Ah, virtue, said St. Peter. That's a different matter. Virtue is always equivocal, a field of opposing forces. It is not merely lack of shortcomings, and certainly not an unstained garment. It belongs to a man's totality, the bad along with the good. Do you think to approach the courts of heaven without passing through, yes, and reveling there, the hostelries of the earth? If you take my advice, you'll ring the bell at the other place. They would certainly teach you a thing or two, not least the meaning of virtue. Down there? Never, the man shuddered. There must be some alternatives. There are always alternatives, said St. Peter. For instance, you could return whence you came and begin again at the beginning. The garment which you call yourself might then have something to tell me. The man drew his robe around him with a fond, possessive gesture. After all my self-denial, he said, and he turned away. I never thought it was possible that this could happen to me. You never thought, leave it at that. St. Peter's face disappeared from the crack. The doors swung together again and a key turned in the lock. And the sun rose and the sun set and the work of heaven went steadily on, systole and diastole, the heartbeat of the universe. And after a time, a lifetime perhaps, the man who had gone dejected away came once more to the door. What, you again? St. Peter exclaimed, but what have you done with that vestal garment, your self-immaculate? For the man was clad in a threadbare robe spattered with patches of brassy color, all shades of the spectrum. I'm wearing it, he replied, turning around like a spinning top, in order to display himself. Are you indeed, said St. Peter as he chuckled. Well, this vestment has clearly done some living. Come closer so I can read it. He pored over the splashes of insolent color as though they were a map. Ha! Yellow, bright as a wasp's wing. This is avarice, if I ever saw it. I would guess that the beggar at the corner no longer gets his lucky penny, nor the waiter his generous tip. And this strip of green must surely be envy. Covetousness seems to have burned in you for the chattels and qualities other men have, warp and woof almost worn away. Now, what have we here in this patch of blue? Greed, would you say? Yep, greed indeed. No more dinners of herbs, but gluttony at all levels, mind and stomach, always a clamor, calling even when full for more. And this broad, explicit expanse of scarlet. Does the man who so deplored lechery still turn his back when he sees a woman, let alone the swing of a skirt? Who would have thought that virgin robe would have had such a tale to tell? And you're proud of its disclosure. See, the sin of pride declares itself here where the violet borders the red. Do you bow now to both king and peasant? I'm inclined to doubt it. And would the sluggard ant that you so far outdistanced, what about him? The splash of black where the thread shows through assures me that he who never was idle has lain in the very lap of sloth. And this torn flap of brilliant orange, what could it be but the sin of wrath? What tempers, what tantrums, what fits of rage? Well now, let me see, is there not something else? What could that be? You've seen the lot. The sins speak for themselves. Ah, I'm looking, said St. Peter gravely, for some small unstained segment, white, perhaps as the swan's wing, that would give them all their meaning. What could that be? The man inquired. I thought the list was complete. That which completes it is repentance, and I do not find it here. But the man gestured wildly at the colors. Aren't they enough? And what about you? Have you repented? St. Peter gave him a long, deep look. I have wept, he replied quietly, at the crowing of the cock. At that, the man turned his head away and was silent for a moment. I thought to cast down a golden crown upon the glassy sea, but that is not to be, it seems. I've never shed a single tear, nor learned aught of repentance. Cannot be taught, said St. Peter gently. It arises of itself in a man when the time in him is ripe. Hitherto, as your robe tells me, you have let your life simply happen. You yourself have played no part in it. I have said there are always alternatives. Why not go down and sit in the cave of your heart and confront whatever you find there, a caracole, maybe of devils and angels? If so, you could join them in the dance, hand to one of them, hand to the other, and so learn much that you now do not know. That garment will be your teacher. The man drew his robe around him and strode away, shaking his head, clearly misliking the proposition. And the sun rose and the sun set, and the work of heaven went steadily on, systole and diastole, the pulse of the universe. And after a time, a lifetime perhaps, St. Peter, humming like a bee at his daily tasks, polishing the knobs of the doors, whitewashing the front step, shaking out the mat, looked up and saw a curious sight. A man naked, but for some tatters of cloth, was sitting hunched up beside the entrance, head bowed, deep in thought. St. Peter tapped him on the shoulder. What's all this? He demanded sternly. Keep away from that fresh white step. I don't want footprints on it. Why, it's you, he exclaimed as the man turned, revealing a face that was now familiar. The man assented wordlessly. But what are you doing sitting here with not a stitch of clothing on you, but a handful of faded rags? What has happened to that famous garment? It's gone, said the man, except for these scraps. You told me to repair to the cave of my heart. This I did, but unwillingly. And as I sat there pondering, telling over the beads of my life, seeing what I had dared not see and dancing with the opposites, my robe disappeared thread by thread, worn out by the strain of that confrontation, and above all, by the grieving for my sins. Yes, in the measure that was needful, all men in some degree wear my many-colored gown, but mostly for that which had no color, the white and stainless garment I had pleased to call my virtue. I had fashioned it. I saw clearly to hide myself, to hide my pretentiousness from my very own eyes, let alone another's. And I wept for shame who had never wept that I could presume to come to this place, assuming the rights of one called and chosen. Alas, the pity of it. The pity of it indeed, said St. Peter. Yet for all that, do not pity me. With my garment in shreds, I am emptied out of all that I was, and I'm content to be so. Who am I? I ask myself and do not know the answer, no more than the worm on the leaf knows or bread cast upon the waters. And what, I also ask, is my purpose without my protecting garment? That I do not know either, but whatever it is, I must try to serve it. If I have meaning, it is there. He hid his face in his hands again, lost in his own thoughts. St. Peter regarded him silently for a long and brooding moment. Blessed are the poor in spirit. You must come in, he said. The man raised his head, startled. But I am naked, he protested, and of all men unworthy. Your nakedness shall be your passport, and none are worthy here. St. Peter flung the doors wide. Step over the whitewash carefully and make your way to the inner court. They will give you a garment there.